Dr. Alex Carter looked out through the thick glass window of the UES horizon as the ship slowly moved toward the blue and green planet below them. After 3 years of traveling through space, they had finally reached their destination. Kepler 442b looked almost like Earth from this distance, with white clouds swirling around its surface and vast oceans that sparkled in the light of its star. Alex had been the chief medical officer on this mission since the beginning. He was 35 years old, with brown hair that was starting to show some gray at the sides and kind eyes that had seen too much suffering during his years as a doctor. Before joining the space program, he had worked in emergency rooms and refugee camps, treating people who had nowhere else to turn. He knew what pain looked like in human faces, and he knew how to heal it. Captain Lisa Morgan walked into the medical bay where Alex was checking his equipment one more time. She was a tall woman with short black hair and a voice that commanded respect from everyone on the ship. She had been chosen to lead this mission because she was smart and careful, never taking risks that might put her crew in danger. "Are you ready for first contact, Doctor?" she asked Alex while looking at the planet through the window. "As ready as I can be," Alex replied, closing his medical kit. "Do we know anything more about them?" "Not much. Our long-range scanners show they have cities and technology. They seem peaceful so far. No weapons pointed at us, no hostile messages. The language computers think they can translate their basic words, but we will need time to learn more." Alex nodded and followed the captain to the bridge. The other crew members were already at their stations, watching the screens that showed the planet getting bigger as they approached. Lieutenant Jake Sullivan was at the communications station, his fingers moving quickly over the controls as he tried to pick up signals from the surface. Jake was younger than Alex, maybe 28, with red hair and a smile that never seemed to leave his face. "Captain, I'm getting something," Jake said suddenly. "It sounds like they're trying to talk to us." The speakers filled with strange sounds that reminded Alex of birds singing mixed with the sound of wind through trees. After a few minutes, the ship's computer began to translate some of the words. "Welcome visitors from the sky. We are the Vorthak. We invite you to our world with peaceful hearts." Captain Morgan smiled. This was exactly what they had hoped for. "Send back our greeting message, Lieutenant. Tell them we come in peace and want to learn about their culture." The next few hours passed quickly as the two groups exchanged messages. The Vorthak seemed friendly and interested in meeting the humans. They invited the Horizon to land near their largest city and promised to show the humans their way of life. Alex felt excited, but also nervous as their ship touched down on the planet's surface. The air was breathable, and the gravity was almost the same as Earth. When the doors opened, Alex could smell flowers and something else he couldn't identify. Maybe spices or herbs that didn't exist on Earth. A group of Vorthak waited for them outside the ship. They were tall and thin, with pale blue skin and large eyes that seemed to glow slightly. They wore long robes made of shimmering fabric that changed colors when they moved. Their leader stepped forward and bowed gracefully. "I am High Counselor Zethra. We welcome you to our world." Her voice was musical, almost like she was singing instead of speaking. Captain Morgan introduced herself and the crew, and Alex noticed how the Vorthak's eyes seemed to study each human carefully. "Come," said Zethra. "We will show you our city and share our food with you. There is much to learn about each other." As they walked through the city, Alex was amazed by what he saw. The buildings were tall and graceful, seeming to grow from the ground like plants instead of being built with hard materials. Gardens filled every space between structures, and the air was clean and fresh. The Vorthak they met along the way seemed happy and peaceful, but then Alex noticed something that made him stop walking near. The edge of the group following them was a young Vorthak who looked different from the others. This one was smaller and thinner, with dark marks on their visible skin that looked like old bruises. The young Vorthak kept their eyes down and never spoke. Even when the other Vorthak were talking and laughing, Alex's medical training kicked in immediately. He recognized the signs of malnutrition, the way the young Vorthak's clothes hung loose, the hollow look around their eyes, the careful way they moved as if everything hurt. He also saw something else that worried him even more. The look of fear that never left their face. "Excuse me," Alex said to High Counselor Zethra. "Is that young person all right? They look like they might need medical attention." Zethra glanced back at the young Vorthek and her expression changed slightly. "That is Yeleth. Do not concern yourself with them. They belong to what we call the silent caste. It is our way." "The silent caste?" Alex asked. "Yes, some among us are born to serve without voice. It is an ancient practice that brings balance to our society. They do not speak, and we do not speak to them. It is how things have always been." Alex felt a cold feeling in his stomach. He looked more carefully at Yeleth and saw other troubling signs. The way they flinched when anyone moved too quickly nearby. The careful way they kept their distance from the other Vorthek. Most disturbing of all, Alex noticed that Yeleth had what looked like old scars on their arms and neck. "But they look hurt," Alex said. "If I could just examine them briefly." "No," Zethra's voice became firm. "You must not interfere with our customs. The silent caste is not your concern." Captain Morgan heard the conversation and quickly stepped between Alex and Zethra. "Of course we respect your ways. Dr. Carter is just naturally concerned about anyone who might be suffering. It's part of his training as a healer." Zethra smiled again, but Alex noticed the smile didn't reach her eyes. "I understand. But some things cannot be changed, even by those who wish to help. Come, let us continue to the great hall where we will feast together." As they walked on, Alex kept watching Yeleth and began to notice other Vorthek who looked similar. They all had the same thin appearance, the same careful movements, the same look of fear. They all stayed at the edges of groups and never spoke. Alex counted at least 6 of them during their walk through the city. That evening, back on the ship, Alex sat in his quarters thinking about what he had seen. Captain Morgan had made it clear that they were not to interfere with Vorthek customs, no matter how strange they seemed to humans. Their mission was to learn and build friendship, not to change an entire alien culture, but Alex couldn't stop thinking about the fear in Yeleth's eyes. As a doctor, he had sworn an oath to help those who were suffering, regardless of who they were or they came from. Everything he had seen today told him that the silent caste was not a religious practice. It was systematic abuse. The question that kept him awake that night was simple. How could he stay silent when everything in his training and his heart told him that people were being hurt? Alex Carter could not sleep that first night on the Vorthek planet. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Yeleth's face with those old bruises and the way they had flinched when anyone came too close. He had been a doctor for 12 years, and he knew the signs of abuse when he saw them. The problem was that Captain Morgan had made it very clear that they were not supposed to interfere with alien customs. No matter what those customs might be, the next morning, Alex decided to act like everything was normal while he figured out what to do. During breakfast in the ship's dining hall, he sat with Lieutenant Jake Sullivan, who was still excited about the successful first contact. "Can you believe how friendly they are?" Jake said while eating his eggs. "And their city is amazing. It's, like they never learned how to make ugly buildings." "They do seem very advanced," Alex replied, pushing his food around on his plate. "Jake, did you notice anything strange about some of the Vorthek yesterday, the ones who didn't talk?" Jake stopped eating and looked at Alex with a curious expression. "You mean the quiet ones?" "Yeah, I saw them. The blue lady said they were some kind of religious group, right?" "The silent something. Silent caste," Alex said. "But Jake, I'm a doctor and those people look sick, malnourished, maybe worse." "What are you thinking, Doc?" Alex was quiet for a moment. He knew that what he was about to say could get him in serious trouble with Captain Morgan. "I think something bad is happening to them. I want to find out what." Jake put down his fork and leaned closer. "Are you talking about disobeying orders?" Because the captain was pretty clear about not interfering. "I'm not talking about interfering yet. I'm talking about observing. Making sure I understand what's really going on before I jump to conclusions." That afternoon, the Vorthek invited the humans to another tour of their city, this time to see their markets and art galleries. Alex brought his medical scanner, a small device that could check someone's health from a distance without them knowing. He hid it in his jacket pocket and made sure it was set to silent mode. As they walked through the crowded marketplace, Alex pretended to be interested in the strange fruits and colorful fabrics the Vorthak were selling, but really he was watching for members of the silent cast. He found them easily. They were the ones carrying heavy bags for the other Vorthak, cleaning up messes and doing all the hard work while everyone else enjoyed the market. When no one was looking, Alex aimed his scanner at 3 different silent cast members. What he saw on the small screen made his hands shake with anger. All 3 showed signs of chronic malnutrition, old bone fractures that had healed poorly, and stress hormone levels that were dangerously high. These were not religious practitioners choosing a simple life. These were people who were being systematically starved and hurt. Alex was so focused on his scanner that he didn't notice High Counselor Zethra approaching until she spoke right behind him. "Dr. Carter, you seem very interested in our people." Alex quickly put the scanner back in his pocket and turned around with what he hoped looked like a normal smile. "Your culture is fascinating. I'm just trying to understand how everyone fits together in your society." Zethra's large eyes seemed to stare right through him. "Understanding is good, but some things are better left unexplored by outsiders. The silent cast exists for reasons that go back thousands of years. It would be impossible for humans to truly comprehend our ways." "I'm sure you're right," Alex said, but inside he was thinking that abuse was the same on any planet that evening. Alex couldn't keep his discovery to himself any longer. He found Jake in the communications room and closed the door behind them. "I need to show you something," Alex said, pulling out his scanner. "But first, you have to promise me that you'll listen to everything before you decide I'm crazy." Jake nodded, and Alex showed him the medical readings from the 3 silent cast members. Jake's face grew serious as Alex explained what each number meant. "This can't be right," Jake said. "Are you sure your scanner is working properly?" "I tested it on myself and 2 other crew members this morning. It's working fine." Alex sat down in a chair and rubbed his tired eyes. "Jake, I think the silent cast isn't a religious group. I think they're slaves." "Worse than slaves, they're being tortured." "That's a pretty big accusation, Doc." "I know, but look at this data. These people are being systematically starved and beaten. The stress hormones alone tell a story of constant fear and pain." Jake was quiet for a long time, looking at the scanner readings. Finally, he looked up at Alex. "What do you want to do about it?" "I want to get more evidence, and I want to see if I can help them. The captain will have us both thrown in the brig if she finds out. Then we don't tell her until we're sure." Jake sighed and looked at his communication equipment. "I might be able to help you get into restricted areas. I've been working with their computer systems to improve the translation software. I think I can create some fake access codes. You do that?" "Doc, if kids are being hurt, then yeah, I'll help." "You find out the truth?" The next day, while the rest of the crew was attending a formal ceremony with the Vorthak leaders, Alex and Jake slipped away from the group. Using Jake's fake access codes, they were able to enter parts of the city that were normally off-limits. To visitors, what they found made Alex's worst fears seemed small in comparison. In the basement levels beneath the beautiful city were rows of small, dirty rooms. In each room, young Vorthak sat on the floor, chained to the walls. They were all thin and covered in bruises, and most of them looked like they were barely alive. Some were so young that they could barely walk. "Oh God," Jake whispered. "They're just children." Alex moved from room to room, scanning as many of the young Vorthak as he could. Every single reading showed severe abuse, malnutrition, and psychological trauma that would take years to heal. These weren't adults who had chosen a religious path. These were children who were being broken on purpose. In the last room, Alex found something that made him understand the whole horrible truth. On the wall was a chart written in Vorthak symbols that Jake's translation device could partially read. It described a conditioning process for young Vorthak who showed unsuitable independence or excessive curiosity. The process involved starvation, physical punishment, and isolation until the young Vorthok learned to be completely obedient. It's a systematic breaking process, Alex said to Jake. They take their own children and torture them until they become the silent caste. The ones who survive become slaves. The ones who don single quotes ... We have to tell someone, Jake said. Who? Captain Morgan already told me to stay out of it. She cares more about maintaining good relations with the Vorthok than she does about stopping child abuse. Alex carefully photographed everything he could, making sure his scanner recorded all the medical data. He knew that eventually he would have to make a choice between following orders and doing what he knew was right. As they made their way back to the surface, Alex's mind was already working on a plan. He couldn't stay silent about what he had discovered, but he also couldn't just walk up to Captain Morgan and expect her to listen. He needed to find a way to make the truth impossible to ignore. That night, Alex sat in his quarters organizing all the evidence he had gathered. Photos of the underground rooms, medical scans showing systematic abuse, and translation records of the conditioning charts. He had enough proof to convince anyone who was willing to look at it. The problem was finding someone who would be willing to listen to the truth when it was easier to just ignore it and maintain diplomatic relations with their new alien friends. Alex Carter spent 3 sleepless nights organizing his evidence and trying to decide what to do next. Every time he thought about approaching Captain Morgan again, he remembered her warning about court-martial and non-interference protocols. But every time he closed his eyes, he saw those children chained in the basement rooms, and he knew he couldn't stay silent much longer. On the 4th day, High Counselor Zethra announced that the Vorthok wanted to hold a grand ceremony to celebrate the new friendship between humans and Vorthok. She explained that it would be the largest gathering in their recent history, with over 1,000 Vorthok coming from all across their continent to witness the historic moment. It will be a great honor for both our species, Zethra said during the morning briefing with Captain Morgan and the senior crew. We have prepared speeches, music, and a feast that will last until the next sunrise. Your people will be given places of honor at the center of the gathering. Captain Morgan was clearly pleased. This sounds wonderful. It will be an excellent opportunity to strengthen our relationship and learn more about your culture. Alex sat in the back of the room, listening to the plans, and suddenly an idea began to form in his mind. 1,000 Vorthok all gathered in one place, with the humans given a central position where everyone could see and hear them. It would be the perfect opportunity to share his evidence with everyone at once. After the meeting, Alex found Jake in the communications room again. I need your help with something big, he said, making sure the door was closed behind them. How big are we talking? Jake asked, though from his expression, Alex could tell he already suspected what was coming. I want to broadcast my medical findings to the entire ceremony. All 1,000 Vorthok need to hear the truth about what's happening to their children. Jake stopped working and stared at Alex. Are you completely insane? The captain will have us both executed? And that's if the Vorthok don't kill us first. Maybe, but Jake, we found children chained in basement rooms. Children being systematically tortured and starved. How can I stay silent about that just to protect my career? Jake was quiet for a long moment, his fingers drumming on his desk. You really think this will help those kids? I think it's the only chance they have. If the regular Vorthok people knew what was really happening, they might stop it. But as long as it stays hidden, nothing will change. What exactly are you asking me to do? Alex pulled out a datapad with his complete report, medical scans, photographs, translations, and his analysis of what it all meant. I need you to modify the communication system so I can broadcast this to the entire gathering in their language so everyone can understand. Jake took the datapad and scrolled through Alex's evidence. His face grew more serious with each image of the abused children. These readings are really from the kids in the basement? Every single one, and there are probably hundreds more that we didn't see. Jake closed the datapad and looked at Alex with a mixture of admiration and terror. You know this is going to end both our careers, right? Probably. But those children don't have careers to worry about. They're just trying to survive. Jake sighed and turned to his equipment. Okay, Doc, let's burn our bridges and see if we can save some lives in the process. The ceremony was scheduled for the next evening in the great plaza at the center of the Vorthic city. Alex spent the day reviewing his evidence one more time and practicing what he would say. He knew he would only get one chance to speak before they stopped him, so every word had to count. As the sun began to set, hundreds of Vorthic filled the plaza. They wore their finest robes and sang traditional songs that echoed off the tall buildings around them. Alex had never seen so many Vorthak in one place, and he was amazed by how peaceful and happy they all seemed. Most of them had no idea what was happening in the basements beneath their beautiful city. Captain Morgan and the senior crew were seated on a raised platform in the center of the plaza, with High Counselor Zethra and other Vorthak leaders beside them. Alex sat with the other junior officers, his heart beating so fast he thought everyone around him must be able to hear it. Jake was at his portable communication station, supposedly there to record the ceremony for Earth, but Alex knew that Jake had secretly modified the system to broadcast on all frequencies that the Vorthak used. When the time came, every Vorthak in the plaza would hear what Alex had to say. The ceremony began with traditional Vorthak music and dancing. Alex barely noticed any of it because he was too nervous about what he was planning to do. He kept looking around the crowd, trying to spot members of the silent cast, but he couldn't see any of them. That made sense. Slaves probably weren't invited to celebration ceremonies. After an hour of music, High Counselor Zethra stood up to make her speech about friendship and cooperation between the two species. She talked about how both humans and Vorthik valued peace and the protection of the innocent. Alex almost laughed at the irony, but he was too scared to find anything truly funny. Then Captain Morgan stood up to give the human response. She talked about how honored they were to meet such an advanced and civilized species, and how much they looked forward to learning from Vorthak wisdom and culture. Alex knew this was his moment. While Captain Morgan was still speaking, he stood up and walked quickly toward Jake's communication station. Several people noticed him moving, but they probably thought he was just adjusting something for the recording. Jake saw him coming and nodded slightly. His finger hovered over the control that would patch Alex into the main broadcast system. Alex took the microphone and looked out at the 1,000 Vorthak faces looking back at him. For a moment, he almost lost his courage. Then he thought about the children in the basement rooms, and he found his voice. "My fellow beings," he said, and Jake immediately activated the broadcast. Alex's voice echoed across the entire plaza in perfect Vorthak translation. "I am Dr. Alex Carter, and I need to tell you something that your leaders do not want you to." "No!" Captain Morgan spun around with a look of absolute fury on her face. High Counselor Zethra jumped to her feet and began shouting orders to her guards. But it was too late. Alex was already talking, and every Vorthak in the plaza was listening. 3 days ago, I discovered that some of your people are being held in basement rooms beneath the city. They are chained to walls. They are starved and beaten. Most of them are children." The crowd began to murmur, and Alex could see confusion and concern on many faces. He pressed on before anyone could stop him. "These children are members of what your leaders call the silent caste, but they are not religious practitioners. They are your own children, taken from their families and tortured until they become obedient slaves." Now the murmuring grew louder, and Alex could see some Vorthak standing up and looking toward the platform where their leaders sat. High Counselor Zethra was screaming at her guards to arrest Alex, but they seemed confused about what to do with so many people watching. Alex pulled out his medical scanner and held it up so everyone could see. "I have medical evidence of systematic abuse, malnutrition, broken bones, psychological trauma that will take years to heal. I have photographs of the rooms where they are kept. I have translations of documents that describe how to break the spirit of young Vorthik through torture." Captain Morgan was now pushing through the crowd toward Alex with several security officers behind her, but Alex kept talking as fast as he could. "Your leaders told me that humans would not understand your ways, but I understand abuse when I see it. And I understand that most of you have been kept ignorant of what is being done in your name. The crowd was no longer murmuring. Many Vorthak were shouting questions at their leaders. Some were demanding to see the evidence Alex mentioned. Others were calling for the basement rooms to be opened immediately. As Captain Morgan reached the communication station, Alex said his final words into the microphone. I was ordered to stay silent about this. But I took an oath to protect those who cannot protect themselves. These children need your help, and they need it now. Captain Morgan grabbed the microphone away from Alex just as Vorthak guards surrounded him. But the damage was already done. 1,000 Vorthak had heard the truth, and many of them were demanding answers from their leaders. High Counselor Zethra tried to address the crowd, claiming that Alex was lying and that humans didn't understand Vorthak biology. But her voice was drowned out by hundreds of Vorthak, demanding to see the basement rooms and demanding an explanation for what they had. Just heard. As Alex was led away by both human and Vorthak guards, he looked back at the crowd and saw something. That gave him hope. The 1,000 witnesses were not staying silent. They were asking questions, demanding answers, and refusing to let their leaders dismiss what they had heard. The truth was out, and there was no way to put it back. Alex Carter sat in the ship's brig, a small room with metal walls and one tiny window that showed him the Vorthak city in the distance. It had been 12 hours since his broadcast at the ceremony, and he could hear shouting and commotion coming from the city even through the thick walls of the horizon. Captain Morgan had not come to see him yet, but Alex knew that when she did, he would probably be facing court-martial and the end of his career. He didn't care about his career anymore. Every few minutes he could see groups of Vorthak moving through the streets, and he hoped that meant they were demanding answers from their leaders about the children in the basement rooms. Lieutenant Jake Sullivan was in the cell next to him, looking worried but not sorry. Do you think it worked? Jake asked through the small opening between their cells. Listen to that noise outside, Alex replied. That's not the sound of people who are willing to stay quiet anymore. At that moment, the door to the brig opened, and Dr. Kate Henderson walked in. She was the ship's psychologist, a woman in her 40s with gray hair and calm eyes that had helped many crew members through difficult times. She carried a data pad and looked very serious. Alex, Jake, I need to talk to both of you, she said, sitting down on the bench between their cells. Did the captain send you to talk us into apologizing? Alex asked. No, she doesn't know I'm here. I came because I need to understand what you found down there. Commander Roy Patterson showed me some of your evidence before the captain locked it away. Alex was surprised. Roy Patterson was the ship's second in command, a man who always followed orders and never questioned authority. Roy looked at my files? He did. And Kate, what Alex found is exactly what I was afraid we might discover, Jake said. Systematic child abuse on a massive scale. Kate opened her datapad and showed them both a psychological analysis she had been working on. I've been studying the behavior of the silent cast members we've seen, and everything matches the profile of severely traumatized individuals. The way they move, the way they avoid eye contact, their responses to sudden movements, it's all consistent with people who have been systematically broken through torture. Alex felt a mixture of relief and vindication. Finally, someone else, with professional training, was supporting what he had discovered. So you believe my medical evidence? I don't just believe it, I can add psychological evidence to support it. The question now is what we do about it. Before Alex could answer, they heard footsteps in the corridor outside. Commander Patterson appeared at the door to the brig, but instead of looking angry like Alex expected, he looked troubled and conflicted. Dr. Carter, I need to ask you some questions about your findings, Roy said, pulling up a chair. And I need you to be completely honest with me. I've been completely honest from the beginning, Alex replied. I know you have. That's what worries me. Roy opened his own datapad and showed Alex a report. This came in from Earth Command an hour ago. They reviewed all your evidence that Captain Morgan transmitted back to headquarters. Alex's heart started beating faster. What did they say? They said that if your findings are accurate, we have a moral obligation to intervene regardless of non-interference protocols. The systematic torture of children is considered a crime against universal principles of decent treatment. Jake, sat up in his cell. Does that mean we're not going to be court-martialed? It means the situation is more complicated than Captain Morgan initially realized. She's been in communication with Earth Command for the past 6 hours, and they're sending new orders. Kate looked at Roy with concern. What kind of new orders? We're being authorized to provide humanitarian assistance to the victims of abuse, but only if we can do it without starting a war with the Vorthak government. Alex felt hope beginning to grow in his chest. What about the Vorthak people? Are they demanding answers about what I told them? Roy's expression became more hopeful. That's the interesting part. Apparently your broadcast caused quite a reaction. There are thousands of Vorthak in the streets demanding access to the basement areas and demanding explanations from their leaders, so some of them believed me? More than some. It turns out that many regular Vorthak have had suspicions about the silent cast for years, but they were afraid to ask questions. Your evidence gave them the courage to demand the truth. Kate stood up and paced back and forth in the small space. This could be the beginning of real social change for their entire species. But it could also lead to civil war if the leadership tries to suppress the reform movement. At that moment, they heard commotion outside the ship. Through the small window, Alex could see a group of Vorthak approaching the horizon. But these Vorthak looked different from the ones he had met before. They weren't wearing the elaborate robes of the ruling class, and they were carrying signs with symbols that Jake's translation device might be able to read. Roy, can you get Jake's translation equipment? Alex asked. I think we're about to meet some of the Vorthak who want reform. Roy left and returned a few minutes later with Jake's portable translator. Jake quickly set it up and pointed it toward the window where they could see the approaching group. Free the silent cast, the translator said as it picked up the chanting. From outside, show us the truth, no more lies. Alex felt tears in his eyes. His broadcast had worked. The Vorthak people were not willing to stay silent about the abuse of their own children. Roy's communication device buzzed, and he answered it quickly. After a brief conversation, he looked at Alex and Jake with a mixture of surprise and relief. That was Captain Morgan. The group outside is asking specifically to speak with Dr. Carter. They're led by someone called Kethin, who claims to be a former government official who wants to help expose the truth about the silent cast. They want to talk to me? Alex asked. Apparently, word of your broadcast has spread far beyond the ceremony. Kethin says that Vorthak from across the planet are demanding investigations into child abuse facilities, and they want your medical expertise to help them understand how to identify and treat the victims. Kate looked excited. This is exactly what we hoped for. The Vorthak people are taking control of the situation themselves. Roy unlocked Alex's cell door. Captain Morgan wants to see you immediately. Earth Command has ordered her to cooperate fully with any legitimate reform movement among the Vorthak, and apparently your broadcast started exactly that kind of movement. Alex stepped out of his cell, hardly believing that just 12 hours ago he thought his career was over. What about Jake? Jake is being released too. Earth Command said that his assistance in exposing systematic child abuse showed excellent moral judgment, even if it meant disobeying direct orders. As they walked toward the captain's ready room, Alex could see more and more Vorthak gathering. Outside the ship, some carried signs demanding justice for the silent cast. Others carried flowers and gifts that seemed to be intended for the humans who had exposed the truth. Captain Morgan was waiting for them in her ready room, along with High Counselor Zethra and 2 other Vorthak that Alex had never seen before. But unlike his previous meetings with Zethra, this time she looked frightened and defensive. Dr. Carter, Captain Morgan said, I owe you an apology. When I ordered you to stay silent about your concerns, I was trying to follow protocols designed to prevent interstellar incidents. I didn't realize that staying silent would make us complicit in systematic child abuse. Zethra spoke up, her musical voice now sounding harsh and desperate. These accusations are false. The silent cast is a sacred tradition that humans cannot understand. One of the other Vorthak, a tall individual with darker blue skin, stepped forward. I am Kethin, formerly of the Council of Elders. High Counselor, I have seen Dr. Carter's evidence, and I have personally investigated the facilities beneath our city. The tradition you speak of is nothing more than systematic torture of our own children." Alex looked at Kethin with admiration. Here was a Vorthok who had been willing to risk everything to investigate the truth, just as Alex had been willing to risk his career to expose it. "Dr. Carter," Kethin continued, "my people need your help. We need to understand how to heal the psychological and physical damage that has been done to the silent cast. We need your medical knowledge to help us save our own children." Alex looked around the room at all the faces watching him, Captain Morgan, who had learned that sometimes following orders meant being complicit in evil, Zethra, who was still trying to maintain a system of abuse, and Kethin, who represented hope for change. Alex Carter stood in what had once been one of the underground torture chambers, but now the room looked completely different. The chains had been removed from the walls, the floors had been cleaned, and soft lighting made everything feel warm and safe. Instead of frightened children cowering in corners, he saw young Vorthak sitting on comfortable cushions while human and Vorthak medical staff worked together to heal their physical and emotional wounds. It had been 6 months since his broadcast to the 1,000 witnesses, and the changes on the Vorthak planet had been more dramatic than anyone could have imagined. The reform movement led by Kethin had grown from a few hundred protesters to millions of Vorthak demanding justice for the silent caste. High Counselor Zethra and her supporters had tried to maintain power by claiming that releasing the silent caste would destroy their society. But their arguments fell apart when regular Vorthak citizens saw the evidence of systematic child abuse. Alex watched as Dr. Kate Henderson worked with a young Vorthak named Milla, teaching her how to speak again after years of enforced silence. Kate had become the head of psychological rehabilitation for the treatment center, and her gentle approach had helped dozens of former silent cast members begin to trust adults again. "Remember, Milla, you are allowed to say no if something makes you uncomfortable," Kate said softly. "Your voice matters and your feelings matter." Milla nodded shyly and whispered, "I understand, Dr. Kate. Thank you for helping me remember how to talk." Alex smiled as he watched the interaction. In the early days after the liberation, many of the former silent cast members had been too traumatized to speak at all. Some had been so conditioned to expect punishment that they flinched whenever anyone approached them. But with patient care and proper treatment, most of them were beginning to heal. Nurse Amy Collins walked up to Alex carrying a medical report. Amy had volunteered to stay on the planet indefinitely to help with the rehabilitation effort and her experience with trauma. Patients had been invaluable. "Dr. Carter, I have the latest medical assessments," Amy said, handing him the datapad. "The physical healing is going better than we expected. Most of the malnutrition has been corrected, and the broken bones are healing properly with the new treatment protocols." Alex looked through the report and felt satisfaction seeing the improvement in his patient's conditions. "What about the psychological healing? That's taking longer as expected." But Dr. Henderson says that 70% of the former silent cast members are making significant progress. Some of them are even beginning to laugh and play like normal children. At that moment, technician Ben Rodriguez came into the room carrying a box of supplies. Ben had been working with Vorthak engineers to design new medical equipment that combined human knowledge with Vorthak technology. The results had been impressive, creating healing tools that worked better than anything either species had developed alone. "Doc, you need to see what Kethin's people have built," Ben said excitedly. "They've created a scanning device that can detect psychological trauma at the cellular level. It's like your medical scanner, but it can actually see the damage that abuse causes to the brain." Alex was amazed by how quickly the reformed Vorthak government had embraced new approaches to healing. Once they understood that trauma could be measured and treated scientifically, they threw all their advanced technology into finding solutions. "Has anyone tested the new scanner yet?" Alex asked. "I did," said a familiar voice from the doorway. Alex turned to see Yeleth, the first silent cast member he had tried to help. Yeleth looked completely different now, healthy, confident, and speaking clearly. They had become one of the most effective advocates for other survivors, helping them adjust to freedom. The scanner shows that my brain is healing, Yoleth continued. The areas that were damaged by years of fear and pain are growing new connections. Dr. Henderson says that with time, the damage might be completely repaired. Alex felt tears in his eyes. When he had first seen Yelith at that welcoming ceremony 6 months ago, he never could have imagined that they would recover so completely. Yelith, you've become an inspiration to everyone here, Alex said. The other survivors trust you because you understand what they've been through. I had good teachers, Yelith replied, looking at Alex, Kate, and Amy. You showed me that healing was possible, even when I thought I was too broken to ever be whole again. Captain Lisa Morgan entered the treatment center, accompanied by Kethin. And several other Vorthak officials? Alex could see from their expressions that they had important news to share. Dr. Carter, Captain Morgan said, I wanted to personally deliver this message from Earth Command. They're recommending you for the Humanitarian Service Medal, the highest honor they can give to someone who risks their career to protect innocent lives. Alex felt embarrassed by the attention. Captain, I just did what any doctor should do when they see people being hurt. That's exactly why you deserve recognition, Kethin said. Alex, because of your courage to speak truth when ordered to stay silent, we have discovered abuse facilities on 12 other continents. Thousands of children have been freed, and our entire society is learning new ways to treat mental illness and trauma, Captain Morgan nodded. Earth Command wants to establish a permanent medical and psychological research station here, combining human and Vorthak knowledge to develop better treatments for trauma survivors everywhere. Alex looked around the treatment center at all the people working together, humans and Vorthak, former victims and their healers, all focused on the same goal of healing and prevention. It was more than he had ever hoped for when he first decided to break his silence. There's something else, Tethin continued. The reformed Vorthak government wants to create a new position, Director of Interspecies Trauma Treatment. We want you to be the first person to hold this position. Alex was shocked. You want me to stay here permanently? We want you to help us build something that has never existed before, a treatment system that can help trauma survivors from any species, anywhere in the galaxy. Alex thought about the offer carefully. He had originally come to this planet as part of an exploration mission, but what they had discovered here was more important than mapping new worlds. They had found a way to heal damage that had been thought permanent, and they had proven that speaking truth could transform entire civilizations. I accept, Alex said finally, but only if we can train local doctors and psychologists to take over the work eventually. The goal should be to make my position unnecessary. Kethin smiled, an expression that looked much more natural on Vorthak faces now that they were no longer hiding terrible secrets. That is exactly what we hoped you would say. As the meeting ended and everyone returned to their work, Alex walked through the treatment center one more time. In every room he saw evidence of healing and hope. Former silent cast members were learning to read and write, developing artistic skills, and slowly building relationships with the Vorthak who had helped free them. He stopped at a window that looked out over the city. In the distance, he could see construction crews building new schools and treatment centers. The Vorthak had decided that the best way to prevent future abuse was to teach every child about emotional health and personal rights. Alex thought about the choice he had made 6 months ago when Captain Morgan ordered him to stay silent about what he had observed. At the time, he had been afraid that speaking up would end his career and accomplish nothing. Instead, his refusal to remain silent had saved thousands of lives and created a new model for interspecies cooperation. Yoleth joined him at the window, looking out at the city they had helped transform. Dr. Alex, Yoleth said, do you think other planets have people who need help like we did? Alex nodded, probably. But now we know how to recognize the signs of systematic abuse, and we know that healing is possible even after terrible trauma. Then we should teach others what we've learned here. Alex smiled and put his hand on Yoleth's shoulder. I think that's exactly what we're going to do. As the sun set over the Vorthak city, Alex felt proud of what they had accomplished together. His decision to diagnose the truth and refuse to stay silent had not only saved the silent cast, it had created a new understanding of how species could work together to heal the worst kinds of damage that intelligent beings could inflict on each other. The 1,000 witnesses who had heard his broadcast had become advocates for change, proving that sometimes the most important medical treatment is simply having the courage to speak the truth when everyone else chooses to look away.